The Forgotten Ones. Chapter 10, The Truth Beneath the Surface. Peter's eyes fluttered open, but they weren't the familiar eyes Ellis had grown up seeing. They were dull, clouded, like the life had been drained from them. His gaze was empty, unfocused, and for a moment, Ellis feared that his brother had truly been lost. "Peter," Ellis whispered, his voice trembling. He leaned closer, desperate for any sign of recognition, any spark of life. Peter's mouth moved, his lips parting to speak, but no sound came out. Instead, his hand slowly lifted, reaching out to grasp Ellis's wrist with a weak, trembling grip. The touch sent a shiver through Ellis, colder than anything the Watchers had made him feel. Peter's hand was like ice, his skin pale and thin, as if he had been drained of all warmth. "Peter," Ellis repeated, his voice more urgent now. "You're safe. I'm here. We need to leave. We have to." But Peter's fingers tightened around his wrist, his grip surprisingly strong despite his fragile appearance. His lips moved again, and this time, Ellis heard something. A faint whisper, like a breathless plea. They took everything," Peter rasped, his voice barely audible. "Ellis, it's all gone." A sinking feeling settled in Ellis's gut. He had fought through so much, faced unimaginable horrors, only to find his brother teetering on the edge of something far worse than death. He wasn't sure if Peter was even fully present, or if some part of him had been claimed by the Watchers, leaving behind this hollow shell. "No," Ellis muttered, shaking his head. "No, Peter, we're getting out of here. We can still." But Peter's grip tightened again, this time more forcefully, and his dull eyes locked onto Ellis's. There was something there now. Something dark, something wrong. It was as if a shadow had passed over his brother's face, twisting it with a fleeting, unnatural expression. "They're still here," Peter whispered, his voice growing more urgent. "They never left." Ellis's heart skipped a beat. He glanced around the chamber, his eyes darting to the shattered mirrors, the empty space where the Watchers had once stood. The room was still, silent, but now with Peter's warning hanging in the air. It felt wrong. The air was too thick, too cold, like the presence that had haunted him this whole time had never truly disappeared. "They've been waiting," Peter continued, his voice trembling. "Waiting for you." Ellis froze. A chill ran down his spine as the realization dawned on him. The Watchers hadn't simply been toying with him. They had been preparing him. This entire place, the mirrors, the shadows, the relentless pursuit. It wasn't about Peter. It was about Ellis. They needed a replacement, Peter whispered. They needed someone to take my place. Ellis's stomach dropped. It had never been about saving Peter. The Watchers had lured him here, used his brother as bait, all to draw him deeper into their trap. And now, with Peter broken and barely clinging to life, it was Ellis's turn. A deep, resounding hum echoed through the chamber, the same hum that had accompanied the Watchers before. But this time, it was different. It wasn't coming from the mirrors. It was coming from deeper within. Ellis stumbled back, pulling his hand free from Peter's grasp. The floor beneath him seemed to tremble, as if the very stone was shifting. He looked down, and his blood ran cold. The shadows were moving again, swirling around his feet, rising from the ground like a dark mist. But this time, they didn't take the form of the Watchers. Instead, they formed something far more terrifying. His own reflection. Ellis watched in horror as the shadow rose before him, twisting and warping until it resembled him perfectly. It stood there, a dark, hollow version of himself, its face void of emotion, its eyes like empty pits of darkness. No! Alice breathed, taking a step back. This isn't real. But the shadow version of himself moved forward, its steps perfectly mirroring his own. And then, without warning, it lunged. Alice barely had time to react as the shadow slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. He struggled, but the shadow's strength was overwhelming, its grip cold and unrelenting. It pressed down on him, its face inches from his. And Alice could feel the darkness creeping into his skin, seeping into his bones. He was being pulled in, pulled under. His vision blurred, the chamber around him fading into a swirling mass of darkness. He could feel himself slipping away, his body growing weaker, his mind unraveling as the shadow began to consume him. But then, in the midst of the chaos, a voice broke through. Alice. Peter's voice. Weak but clear. Alice forced his eyes open, his body trembling as he fought against the shadow. His brother's face swam into view, pale and fragile but alive. Peter was reaching out to him, his hand outstretched. His eyes filled with something Alice hadn't seen in hours. Hope. Fight it, Peter whispered. Don't let them take you. Alice's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't going to let it end like this. Not after everything. Not after coming so close. With a surge of strength, Alice pushed back against the shadow, his hands gripping its cold, dark form. It fought back, twisting and writhing. But Alice held firm, refusing to let it consume him. And then, with a final, desperate effort, he threw the shadow off of him. The darkness recoiled, writhing in agony as it collapsed into itself, dissolving into a formless mass of shadow. It hissed and shrieked, and then, just like that, it was gone. Alice lay on the cold stone floor, gasping for breath. His entire body ached, his mind spinning from the ordeal. But he was still alive. He turned to Peter, who was now sitting up, his face pale but determined. Alice, Peter whispered, his voice shaking. We have to leave. Now. Alice nodded, too exhausted to speak. He staggered to his feet, pulling his brother up with him. Together, they moved toward the only light they could see. The chamber behind them growing darker and darker with every step. But as they reached the doorway, Alice couldn't help but glance back one last time. In the center of the room, where the shadow had dissolved, a new mirror had appeared. It stood tall, its surface smooth and reflective, untouched by the chaos of the past hours. And in that mirror, Alice saw something that chilled him to his core. His reflection was smiling. And so the story ends. But the mystery lingers. Did Alice truly escape, or did something dark follow him out? If you felt the chill in your bones and the thrill of the unknown, please give this video a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to Eerie, HazeeDaze for more unsettling tales, and share with friends who dare to venture into the shadows. The stories may end, but the nightmares continue. Sleep soundly, if your mind lets you.